So before we start talking about guns, I would like to explain this longer than 3 day break since my last video. The reason for this delay was an exam that didn't even happen at the end. The problem was out of nowhere, a midterm exam was scheduled for Monday, which now has ended up getting rescheduled to Tuesday, Wednesday, or next week. And some assignments. The greatest problem I have with my college by far are not the exams or the workload, it's the schedule. Nothing ever happens on time, which disturbs the entire balance of what you want to do and stops you from creating anything new. It's really frustrating. Well, so sorry for that delay. If any of you were waiting, I apologize and thank you as well. So talking about Gantz, I read it in about 4 days or 3, don't quite remember. It's quite possibly one of the most weird things ever that I have experienced in my life, in a good way. In this video, we will go through Gant's characters, the atmosphere, the artwork, but we will go in a little bit more detail about the final arc of the story, which I believe was underwhelming for most of the fans of this manga. I will talk about the hits and the misses of the final arc and why even after all those misses it would still arguably be my personal favorite arc in the story. Starting off with the characters of Gantz, it's got a diverse cast with people from different backgrounds, kind of a representation of the entire human race. There are some amazing hits in the main cast of the story. When I was reading Gantz, honestly I didn't think there would be a main cast considering every chapter someone died. The hits in the story would definitely be Kei Kurono, the main character, Muscle Rider, I'm not calling him anything else. Takeshi was amazing, Sakata and Sakurai were great, Nishi was amazing, Izumi was also a great addition. The old man, well, his dynamic with the main character is the best in the show. Maybe an unpopular opinion considering you have Muscle Rider and Takeshi too, but it's my opinion. And the female cast for the most part is a miss, with the exception of Tei Kojima to a certain extent, and I will explain why further along the video. Now, of all the characters, Kei Kurono, the main character, is definitely the best. But I do have a nitpick about him too, which is also concerning the final arc. This story without that nitpick has an S tier main character. Well, he's still, in terms of personal bias, he is an S tier character for me. The point where I realized, even with all these great characters, that the main character really does put the show on his back, and you realize that once you reach the Osaka. I consider him an incredible character anyway, but he truly ascended in my personal favorite main character list when I realized just how enjoyable he was compared to other characters. His dynamic with the old man, or how he is what Masaru wants to become in life, or what he was, and how they at the start wish for different things, as Kei, who has sort of lost his way, what he desires, and Masaru, what he wants through idealizing what he thinks of Kei, what Kei used to be. It's amazing stuff. You could make a separate video on just the main character, really. He really grows on you considering the opinions most of the fans seem to have on him very early in the series. And as I said, his dynamic with the old man. It's always the old men that show the way to young people in most cases in every form of media. Movies, TV shows, books, manga, characters like Gandalf, Dumbledore, Shanks, but not in Gantz. In Gantz, the author makes Kei the role model for Masaru, and then Kei ends up idealizing Masaru and also inspires the old man in that road, who ends up inspiring Inaba to die a brave death. The author, in my opinion, does a near perfect job in terms of dynamic between the characters, well, except most of the female cast. The atmosphere of this manga is also weird, but in a good way, because first of all, I have never seen a more accurate representation of internet than what this mangaka does, and also a more stupid populace in a world. Because let's be clear, I love One Piece as much as the next guy, but for sure I would not even think about One Piece when a freaking apocalypse would be happening. It's bizarre, really. The author has just given us extreme versions in this manga, extreme versions of a bully, extreme versions of idiots, of bad parents. There is no in between, of girls simping. And also, what completely just made me lose my faith in this world's populace was when this guy, in the middle of an alien zoo, being a prisoner, all he could think of was his girl being stolen, or the girl getting jealous at such a time. I liked it, don't get me wrong, but the populace is mostly stupid on extreme versions in this manga. Talking about artwork in Gantz, it's great overall, but the author's creativity really shines when he is drawing aliens. Expanding upon aliens, he's really creative on how he draws in a way in which they both look menacing when the author wants them to, and innocent when the author wants them to look innocent. Finally, to the controversial final arc. As I said earlier in this video, it still might, after all those misses, be my favorite arc in the story, and I do accept that it could have been done 100 times better. Talking about misses first. The first one we are gonna talk about is artwork. The artwork gets really messy in the final arc, to the point where you couldn't even tell what's happening in a fight scene, especially the fight scenes. It was one of the major misses of the final arc. Probably the biggest miss, along with the next thing I am going to talk about, the unexpected plot lines or plot lines that weren't delivered on. What the hell happened to the vampires? Like, what was their history? Why were they assigned to hunt Gantz soldiers? That was a major missed opportunity. The final villains of the story, those who made the Gantz balls possible, they could have been included in the story both through the reporter and the vampires. A better history could have been given to them, but this arc heavily suffers from the lack of construction. Gantz wasn't your typical manga anyway, it never had any normal structure, but the final arc maybe suffers more from a bad structure being applied than none at all, which goes to show with the Tei Kojima situation as well. She was the only compelling female character left in the story, but her cuteness for many fans of this manga is ruined because of what her character goes through in the final arc. I seem to have a bit of a different opinion on the Teikojima situation, a bit of a more sympathetic view. While you could have constructed her arc, her path in the story better by lessening Kei-chan again and again, and Kei's appearances as well, but I think Teikojima still manages to get a horrifying truth across. Maybe because she is a fan favorite at this point, so I can see that it would be the ideal move, both in terms of making sure the atrocities hit as hard as they can for the audience, and that the audience don't grow tired of it. The author for me succeeds in this for the most part. The horror that is shown through her story is absolutely chilling. Just when you think you have seen all there is to see in Gantz, it surprises you again. The humans being treated as pets by this superior race is done well in my opinion. For the most part, only if it wasn't as dragged out as it is. If the chapters that were focused on Tei Kojima weren't as long. Another major nitpick I have with Gantz is with the main character Kei Kurono, which I mentioned earlier in the video. After Rieka ends up creating a duplicate Kurono, I mean they both are duplicates, I mean you get the point, it looks as though the other Kurono kind of loses some of himself. A sort of mischaracterization happens. When both Kei Kuronos interact and the Kei who is with Tei Kojima comes to know about what Rieka did, how the old man could have been saved, he doesn't react at all. Now I know this isn't a shonen and main characters aren't perfect, all those arguments I get them. It still doesn't make any sense for Kei who has grown so much, has formed special bonds with Tei Kojima, with Masaru, with the old man, he doesn't seem to react at all, while that affection for the old man seems to have passed to the other Kei, which was a major miss. The arc does have some amazing conclusions to characters though, with Sakurai being my favorite one. But even with all these misses, what makes this arc so special is chapter 371, The Proof of Humanity. This was horrifying about what the people who made the Gantz balls possible show to us completely defeat what our characters have learned. This hollow concept of God and how they prove it to them completely hones it to the true horror of the series, the tragic state of death and hope. Even as the main character tries to argue, he loses. All that memory feelings turn you would normally accept this story to take, it doesn't take that turn. It doesn't happen. The main character dies. Well, one of them. The other one who lives doesn't see this reality. There is just something about this chapter that's absolutely bone chilling. Gantz is one of those manga where whatever the main characters have learned throughout the series is eventually in the end defeated. And while the build up for that defeat isn't of course anything to applaud, as these creatures of course are not well explained, it still does make you wonder. I finished Gantz at 3 a.m. I stayed awake until 5. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking on that chapter, and as much as I thought, the more unpleasant and horrifying it became. This chapter alone makes this arc special for me, even though I know it doesn't compare to earlier arcs in terms of fulfilling its potential by a long shot, but it's still my favorite arc in the story. And that chapter 371 is still by far my favorite chapter in Gantz. Overall, I would say Gantz was an amazing manga. Even after all those misses, I agree that the final arc wasn't what it should have been by a long shot. I have already mentioned my nitpicks with it and what I found amazing. If the final arc had delivered, chapter 371 of Gantz would have gone down in manga as one of the greatest chapters ever written, by far. And Gantz, in terms of enjoyability, is still on the level of One Piece, of Kingdom, of Haikyuu, of Berserk. It's up there, so I would really recommend it. And Gantz is also a really high-paced manga. There are many chapters where there's just no dialogue, just fight scenes and people dying and screams. So it's really easy to get through. Even after 380 something chapters, you don't feel the pressure. These chapters just fly by. That's just how high-paced Gantz is. So thanks for recommending me to read Gantz. And if there's something else that I should be reading, please recommend. Again, 371 chapter, that was worth the hype. So I would really recommend Gantz to anyone who wants to read it. So that's all for this one. If you enjoyed this, like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you next time. And if you had a problem with my voice, well, it isn't only the mic's fault this time. I have a problem with my voice, with my throat. So sorry if anyone experienced more than a problem that it usually is.